Y'all, this is not good. It's not good, and it's not right. And I know that some people are going to feel an obligation based off their political affiliations to defend one way, or off their racial inclinations to defend another way. But if you're a Christian, you need to understand something today. You have a responsibility to stand up for what's right. And if you don't know the difference between right and wrong, you need a foundational revival on God's Word. And if you don't want to go to God's Word for that foundational revival, then you can't possibly understand what is truly right and what is truly wrong. Murder is a sin. It's wrong. And I believe at a fundamental level, every Christian will agree with that fact. Where we get it twisted is where we start bringing politics into it. We don't need the world telling us how to perceive what's right and what's wrong. A Christian ought to be able to look at the facts and decipher from their understanding of God's Word and say right is right, wrong is wrong. We must not be divided on this vital issue of right or wrong. We must not be divided on the vital issue of race. I may lose friends for saying this, but I'm saying this with all the sincerity of my heart. There is only one race. There's only one race, that is the human race. We get that from God's Word. I don't care what kind of twisted theology, bibliology you might have, thinking that there might be some superiority in any of that nonsense. God created man from the dust of the ground. God created woman from that man. And from that one man and from that one woman came all the variations of humankind. And so at a fundamental level, we are all related to each other. And the tragedy that happened up in Minneapolis happened to a family member of ours. That's not okay, and we must stand up for justice. But I'm telling you in this video that the key to social justice reform, the key to having rights reestablished, is not saying let the black people have the same rights as white people, or punish the white people for the black people, or the tan people, or the Hispanics, or the Chinese. That is not social justice. Because from a biblical level, true social justice is all of us burning in the lake of hell. And I know this is something that a lot of people don't want to hear right now, but it's the truth. And we must be true when we talk about what's right and wrong, and we must be true when we talk about race. The problem in America today is not racism. Racism is a title for sin, and racism certainly is a sin. America does not just have a racism problem. We have a sin problem. And if anyone wants to stand up and say, well, it's not as racist as it was, or people are just pointing to one or two facts, sin is the problem. And we as Christians, we must stand firm to not be divided on what's right and wrong. We must not be divided on the remedy. What is the remedy for what's going on there? Is it looting and rioting? I think we know the answer to that. And I think some people are just so frustrated and so desperate to get their point across and to get their message across that they do foolish, idiotic, stupid things because they feel. Martin Luther King Jr. said, never let a man drag you so low that you hate him. He's not God. He's not a prophet. He's not a perfect person. But those words ring true today. The answer to hate must never be hate. The answer to evil must never be evil. When the Pharisees brought a woman caught in the act of adultery to Jesus and said, we caught her in the very act. How disgusting is that? What kind of a creep is creeping around someone watching for them to do an act of adultery, snatch them out of the bed, drag them straight to Jesus and say, what are you going to do? Jesus gets down in the dirt right next to this humbled, disgraced woman, starts writing in the sand, and says, any of you that is not guilty of this sin, you cast the first stone. What is he saying? Her problem is not an adultery problem. Her problem is a sin problem. And yes, the law demands that we end her life for her sin. But the spirit of the law is not the punishment. The spirit of the law is remorse and grief for going against God's word and going against God's law. And as this humbled woman sits here seeing grace and seeing mercy and love and forgiveness, God says, go and sin no more. I have my personal feelings for what should happen to the police officer who murdered that man. I have my personal feelings for what should happen to the police officers who stood by and enabled him to do such a terrible, disgusting thing. I support law enforcement. Right is right. Wrong is wrong. And I can't help but on a human level just want to be angry and lash out. God has not called us to vengeance. God has called us to truth. And in this world that's been afflicted in this year 2020, we've just been decimated on so many levels. It is now time for Christian men to stand up and be Jesus Christ to this world. It is time for believers to unite themselves with believers and point people, a lost and dying world, to Jesus Christ. It is time to heal hate with love. It is time to heal death with life. We can't go back and fix the past as much as we'd like to. We can't avenge ourselves enough to the point where we feel like at last we've arrived. But what we can do is say, see that was evil, and those evil people deserve justice. But even if that justice is never settled here on earth, it will be settled in heaven. I promise you that. And if you live in hate, if you live in bitterness, if you live in anger, then not only has that man died unjustly, but you'll live a life of dying fruitlessness, because God cannot work through bitterness. Christ will be magnified, and you will understand your true purpose here on this earth when you lay aside your right and your entitlement to anger and to hate and to vengeance, and join together with believers, hurt, broken, sad, fearful, hopeful, trusting, full of faith that God is in control. And no matter what the enemy brings our way, he will have his will accomplished. You say, how could God, a loving God, allow this to happen? It's not my place to question God. And if you want to live in the question mark, be my guest. Enjoy the misery. I challenge you and I submit to you that the answer to this tragedy is the answer to every tragedy. God, I trust you. I don't understand. I don't know if there's any way I could understand, but I believe in you and I trust you. Please help me make a difference amongst the people that I have influence with. It's not an easy answer, but it is the right answer. May God help us to heal the hurting and to be a compassionate, truthful advocate for what's right. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory. Don't be looking for a fight. Don't be looking for conflict. The Bible says, let each of us esteem the other better than ourselves. And let that mind reign supreme in everything that we try to do. I hope this video is a blessing to you.